Hello everyone. In this lecture we're going to look at 5 major topics. The general theme of the lecture is life after this class. And what we saw, what I wanted to talk about was where do you go towards your teaching career once you start getting towards the end of college, and then where do you go after that? So we're going to look at 5 topics here. One is capstone, which is also known as student teaching. The other will be the job search that many of you will do as an educator. And I'm just going to give you some little helpful hints on the job search. Many people, whenever they get to student teaching, they don't have a job yet. So we're going to talk about getting everything in line and how that works. We're going to look at the teacher pay schedule. And then we're going to look at MSTAR, which is an evaluation method used by schools. And then we're going to fast forward 30 years, and we're going to look at just a little bit of retirement so that you know everything about retirement. Many times educators will say, well, I did not know this. So this is just kind of one of those lectures. It's a kind of a fun little path that I like to take, and I like to lecture this on to everyone. What I found was I used to lecture some of these sections, especially the job search. I used to lecture that during student teaching. And I remember I did it one time, and all the teachers said, well, why didn't someone tell us this earlier? So I started incorporating this lecture earlier into the teaching process. So many of y'all are in your first or second year of college teacher education, so it's good to bring one of these lectures in. And it just takes it's a real quick lecture, and you get to sit back and enjoy what teaching is about and where it's going to go in the future. So the first thing we will look at is capstone or student teaching.
Recently having completed your practica, what tips would you give to a future student teacher who hasn't yet gone out to do their practica?
Okay, I think what I would say is that at the beginning of your APT of the practicum, after you've just finished a really difficult course, a very intense, condensed course, you are sitting in the middle, there's a couple days off, and you're looking at your practicum, and it feels huge. It feels like you've just accomplished a mountain, and it feels like you're at the bottom of a new one. And I think the tip that I would give is that in the beginning it feels like a lot, but it goes by so quickly. So just kind of remember that if you start on the right foot, you're going to get going, and you'll be like unstoppable, and it'll be over just really quickly. So when it feels like a lot, I guess my tip is just to keep in mind that if you can do it at the beginning, you'll be able to do the whole thing.
Okay. Yeah. So you said it feels like a mountain. What is that mountain consist of?
Well, it's a lot of pressure because you're teaching units, and you have to do unit planning and lesson planning, which for a lot of people might even be their first time. A lot of IPT situations are quite relaxed, where sometimes even your mentor teacher might do planning for you or unit planning for you. And in your APT, you have a lot more responsibility on you. And I mean, the other part of the mountain is you're stressed about getting a good evaluation, and you might even just be tired or whatever. And so I think as long as you concentrate on what has to be done in the beginning, it's going to go well.
Yeah. People often worry about the relationship that they will develop with their mentor teacher or cooperating teacher. Any tips on that?
You know what? In my IPT, I had a very young mentor teacher. She was 32. She had young kids. She was really fun. We had a lot in common, and we were chatty. We got along really well. And in my APT, I had an older mentor teacher, an excellent one. But it was a little bit harder for us to relate because I'm still fairly young, just finishing my degree. And I had to really realize that just because she wasn't as chatty and outgoing as I am naturally, it didn't mean that we had a bad relationship. And we still had, she still gave me the feedback that I needed, although it didn't turn into, an hour over coffee. I had to really realize that she was giving me what I needed, and I was giving her what she needed, and thus it was successful, even if she wasn't as warm as I was used to.
Okay. So now that sounds like you're saying that from a point of reflection in retrospect.
Yeah.
As you were going through that experience, how did it feel?
Well, it felt a little bit confusing. Like I felt like when I would think about my relationship with my mentor teacher, I felt a little bit like, should I be pushing this further? Should I be encouraging communication? Am I doing something wrong? And then I really had to let myself sit back and realize, what was expected of each of us. And that if I was doing my part and she was doing her part, then things were okay.
Great.
Yeah. And the other thing, just to add one more thing, is the thing that surprised me about my APT is that you also, as real of an experience as it is, you're in somebody else's classroom. And they have already established classroom management and rules within that classroom that you might not agree with, but a lot of the times you just have to go with what's set for you and work the best that you can in that situation.
Now, whether you agree with them or not, sometimes at least you're inheriting them,
Yeah.
and you don't have to establish
Exactly,
them.
yeah. Yeah.
Any other tips that you'd like to offer at a more granular level? For example, the importance of planning, or the importance of relationships with students, or the relationship you build with your mentor teacher.
Well, I'd say definitely talk a lot with your mentor teacher. Even if you don't see eye to eye on a lot of things, you really have to just talk and work things out. Go through the textbooks, go through some of their lesson plans, go through every single resource that they have. You need to know the resources in your arsenal, because they just might not have textbooks. They'll have games, they'll have things to read for the students, different closed activities that you really should be aware of and get to be familiar with, because ultimately it's great to have those to differentiate your activities. As for lesson planning, be very reasonable with wait time. I thought lots of activities would take 2 minutes. Like, read this passage, that's 2 minutes, talk about it 5 minutes, 7 minutes. It often took maybe double that. I would plan something. I would still plan the same way, but then I would expect half that lesson to go into the next class. And so it would sort of be, in a way, planning ahead. And so that's my next point to you. You have to plan ahead. And so know the end goal and try to reach it first. So you don't say, I want to teach verbs, so I'm going to teach this, 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 and this today. Think about what you ultimately want them to know. So have that list in mind and reach towards it. So that's sort of the more advice I would give for that.
So you just saw an introductory video on student teaching. So now let's look at the Mississippi State University website, which deals with any time that you're going to go out to the schools and you're going to do licensure. So this becomes kind of a website that many student teachers and anyone doing site visits will have to look at. This is known as the Office of Clinical Field-Based Instruction, Licensure, and Outreach. So just looking at that title, we get the acronym OCFBI. But when you say Office of Clinical Field-Based Instruction, that would be any time someone goes to a site to observe or to student teach or to do any of your classes where you're going to go out to the schools. Licensure means that this is the department of the College of Education which does educational licensure. So I want to pause there and explain what that means. The Mississippi Department of Education allows for licensure, and they license all teachers. However, they also allow each university to sign off on paperwork for a license. So in a real world scenario, that means if I'm a person who wants to be a school teacher and I go to Mississippi State University, there needs to be a person at Mississippi State University that signs off on my licensure and verifies that I've done everything for licensure that goes to the State Department. That person, of course, is Dean Richard Blackburn, the College Dean of Education. But Dean Blackburn cannot be expected to review and do every licensure application that goes through his office. That would take up not only his time, but it would take up a whole department's time. So Dean Blackburn and all College of Deans in Mississippi, in the whole state, actually give their signature authority to what they call the OCFBI, or many universities have certain departments like that. Like Delta State would have a clinical field base. Ole Miss has Office of Site Visits. So every university has a department that controls licensure and signs off under the dean's authority. And that would be Mississippi State University's would be the OCFBI. So anytime that there's a licensure question or how I'm going to get licensed, and you go to the dean would say, well, I've given my signature authority to OCFBI. OCFBI is headed by Director Donna Shea, and she does a great job. And also you have what's called outreach. And outreach is whenever the university wants to do programs with other universities or other schools. So OCFBI becomes a major wing and a major arm for the university, and it is spearheaded by the dean. This website is where you would go to if you're wanting to do anything inside the school. And it has some very useful and very good tools for you to review. One thing you'll see is it says the licensure tab, which is right here. The licensure tab, if you click on it, will walk you through how to get a license. But we're more interested in the teacher internship, which is right here. So if you click on this, it's going to show you general information, and it's going to walk you through all the standards, everything that you'll need to do for student teaching. But we want to definitely look at these forms, assessments, and this assessment is the Teacher Intern Assessment Instrument, also known as the TIAI. Now I want to give you a little bit of a back history of the TIAI. Years ago, you'll notice first off that Mississippi, anything in Mississippi likes acronyms. So we have a lot of like OCFBI, TIAI, STAI. We have a lot of abbreviations that we use. So you just have to kind of embrace them and you learn them as you go. Years ago, all the universities got together and they said we need to have a common rating system for all of our student teachers or anyone who's an intern in a school district. Years ago, they created what was called the Student Teacher Assessment Instrument, which became known as the STAI. Well, after several years, they created what was known as, they got together once again and they said, let's revamp it and fix it up. And it became known as the Teacher Intern Assessment Instrument, or the TIAI. One reason for the name change is Student Teacher Assessment Instrument would denote that someone was student teaching. And with the TIAI, the Teacher Intern Assessment Instrument, that means it could be used for student teachers as well as alternate route teachers. So all the universities adopted this, and it became known as the instrument, which is the TIAI. The TIAI form can be found by clicking here, and it's going to open up a PDF for you. You'll notice that it has different domains, and it has different ways to measure. And what the purpose of the TIAI instrument is, when someone comes to evaluate you, they'll have a rubric to grade you. So it's, even though you're very early in your teaching career and you're pre-student teaching, it's good to embrace the TIAI and just start learning some some aspects of it. Many times a real world teacher will say, we do not get assessed like this. This is a lot of indicators. But you're going to see later on that something's called MSTAR has come into play, and we'll see how that factors into real world teaching. But the TIAI is a very effective tool because it allows for breaking down a teacher and analyzing them on multiple aspects of their teaching career. You'll notice that it has Domain 1, Planning and Preparation. And let's just look at one of these indicators. Selects developmentally appropriate performance-based objectives. So this would go back to our objective writing. This would mean that someone writes good objectives. And when you write objectives well, then you'll notice it has Mississippi Curriculum Straight Framework or Common Core standards, and this is how someone would be rated. Incorporates diversity. So Domain 1 is about planning and preparing for the lecture as you're going into it. As you look at Indicator 3, integrates core content knowledge. Whenever we're evaluating someone in that, we're talking about, does the person look at, for example, if they're a history teacher, are they looking at some of those content themes that the NCSS talks about? Look at number 4, plans appropriate and sequential teaching procedures. And that would be in TaskStream when you're looking at teaching procedures. So a lot of these under Domain 1 is whenever a person comes in to observe you at student teaching, they're going to say, okay, we're going to sit down and we're going to see your lesson plans, and we can actually start grading you on these before you even start teaching. Now, this is where it kind of differs. Sometimes whenever you're student teaching or you're practice teaching and someone is observing you, they may ask for you to send your lesson plans a day before. And this is so that they can look at your lesson plans and they actually can evaluate you on 1, 2, and 3, and 4, as well as basically the entire domain 1 before you even start teaching. And it also, so I like to do that. That does make the teaching better. However, I have done it both ways. I've done it where I've evaluated domain 1 while I'm sitting in the classroom, and that both ways work well. It's not difficult to do. You'll notice, now let's look at domain 2 is the actual assessment. Look at number 7. Communicates assessment criteria and performance standards to the students and provides timely feedback on students' academic performance. This evaluation method is solely based on the assessment system. So when we're watching you teach and you tell students that you're going to have a homework assignment and this is what you're looking for, then that would mean that would be acceptable or target when you're communicating what you're looking for in the homework assignment. But also you'll notice it says it gives timely feedback. That would be if you're teaching the class and someone says something and you go, okay, that's a good job. But also we can look at your grades and some sample grades that you've done to students on their homework, and we can see if you gave them feedback on that. Instead of using a red pen and just checking off, did you give some constructive feedback? Just spend a couple of more seconds on that homework assignment just to highlight what they need to address. As you scroll down, you'll see domain 3 is about instruction. Uses acceptable written, oral, and nonverbal communication. Provides clear, complete written and or oral directions. So when you get into domain 3, you're really looking at the actual teaching that the person is doing. Communicates expectations for learning to all students. Conveys enthusiasm for teaching. Number 12 actually is pretty easy to measure. It's just how the person, are they happy? And you don't have to be all bubbly and cheerful and just really excited, but just does your demeanor show that you've really tried, you've really worked hard, and you've done a good job with your lesson? You usually see that within the first 5 seconds of the lesson. You know, does the person look like they're tired? Does the person look like they actually want to teach this lesson? Provides opportunities for students to cooperate, communicate, and interact with each other. This does not mean you have to do cooperative learning, which we've learned before. This just means that you're looking at, did the student, do they have time to raise their hands? Do they ask questions? Sometimes do they work in groups? That's fine. Demonstrates knowledge of content. Do you know what you're talking about is a big aspect. Now, it's okay to talk about theories and conjecture, but whenever you're teaching about the Civil War and you say it started in 1871, then you're off 10 years. If you say the Civil War was fought over slavery, that's fine. If you say the Civil War was fought over something else, then but it's okay to talk about theories, because there's a big movement nowadays saying, was the Civil War fought over slavery or was it over states' rights? That's fine to get into the nitpicky of that. But when you're talking about content, you cannot really mess up the major facts, such as the Civil War had slavery as an issue. The Civil War had a starting time of 1861. It killed 600,000 Americans. So you really want to get the facts correct. Provides learning experiences that accommodate differences in developmental and individual need of diverse learners. This would be your areas of tactile, kinesthetic, auditorial, and visual. This would be something that you need to make sure that students are getting the diverse learning aspects of that. Engage students in analytical, creative, and critical thinking. Elicits input during lessons and allows sufficient wait time. Wait time is something that many teachers have issues with, and wait time is just taking a breath during the lesson. And that's the best way I can describe that. If we were in a face-to-face classroom, I would let everyone demonstrate that. Taking a breath during a lesson and just looking at the class can be very unnerving. But I have experienced that when you're standing in front of a class and you stop and you just look at the class for about 1 second, everyone's looking at you. And then after about 2 seconds of quietness, everyone kind of looks down because they realize that you're focusing on them. So wait time is very important. So when you ask someone a question, you say, who was Einstein? You want to pause there. And wait time is very good because it shifts the focus from the lecture to the student. So practice wait time and practice it in conversations with your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your significant other. Practice wait time. Where do you want to eat today? And just have a pause there. Practice that. It actually works very well. If you talk too much and you go from segue to segue to segue, then you need to really work on wait time. Wait time shifts the focus from you to the person that you're talking to. So play with that. That is one of the things that we always try to recommend to our student teachers, is to play around with wait time. 19 is using family or community resources, special guests or materials. You can use anything from the library. Those are pretty easy indicators. Look at Domain 4. Domain 4 focuses a little bit more on classroom management. You'll see it says learning environment, monitors and adjusts the classroom environment to enhance social relationships, attends or delegates routine tasks, taking role. Do you have someone taking role for you? Are you taking role? How are you handling the task of the day-to-day operations of the classroom? Uses a variety of strategies to foster appropriate student behavior, creates and maintains a climate of fairness, safety, respect, maximizes time available for instruction. So how are you with time management? Domain 5 talks about professional responsibilities, establishes opportunities for communications to parents. Are you talking to the parents? Are you sending newsletters home? Items such as that. So we have a 5-domain TIAI, teacher assessment, teacher instrument assessment, intern assessment instrument. So we have a 5-domain instrument. And you can see now how, as an observer, when you're observing someone teach, you can bounce from each one. So now let me just talk to you about first person and how I would observe someone when they student teach. I usually walk in and before the lesson, I'll email the student teacher or anyone that I'm observing teaching, and I'll just say, hey, send me your lesson plans if possible. So they'll send me their lesson plans, and I'll look at them and I'll go, okay, I will be there tomorrow at 2 o'clock, and I'll give them a time that I'm coming. I kind of like it when they know I'm coming. However, I always like to reserve the right to do the pop-in, and I'll explain that in a minute. So then I'll show up, I've read their lesson plans, and I like to go straight to the back or straight to an area that I'm not in front of the classroom. I don't want the students to focus on me. I kind of just want to blend in. Now, for the most part, I know that the student teacher has probably warned the students and threatened them and said, look, this is the way it's going to be, and my student teacher's coming, my university supervisor is coming. And that's another term you're going to hear, so make sure you remember what that is. University supervisor is who the person who comes to observe you is. So you're an intern and there's a university supervisor. So as a university supervisor, sometimes the students have warned them, you got to be good. If you're not good, then, no recess. And you kind of get that atmosphere. And the students will be looking at you, and you kind of just want to sit down in the back. And I like to sit there, and I'll have a laptop out, or I'll just have a notebook out. Recently, I've gotten rid of the laptop, and I just had a notebook. And I'll have the TIAI there. I like to have a blank TIAI, and I can just kind of go through there. So as the lesson starts, I'll usually have my head down, and I'm listening, because this is just the way I do it. I've kind of discovered that when I'm staring at the student teacher, they get real nervous. And I don't want them to get nervous. I kind of want them to get in their own little atmosphere. So what they perceive as me not paying attention is actually me listening. And when they're not looking, I'll pop my head up and I'll scan the classroom. I don't want them to be nervous, because a nervous teacher, it's just not a good lesson. They're going to be nervous, but I don't want them to be, really nervous. So I'll keep my head down and I'll be listening. And I can kind of pinpoint. I've watched a lot of lessons, so you kind of hear and see the teaching, and you can see how it's going. It's going well. So when there's a very well-constructed lesson plan on the books and everything's going well, then you can kind of get a good sense of it. If the lesson goes very well and I'm happy with it, then towards the end of the lesson, I'll go ahead and pull that TIAI out, and I'll start marking things just for my general notes. And I'll say, okay, I'm going to give them a 4 on this, or I'm going to give them a 3 on target, and I'll have a target on this, and indicator 4 is going to be acceptable. And then I'm going to knock out that and make that look good. And then after the class is over with, I'll tell the student teacher, I'll say, do you have a place for us to go? And then we'll do the debrief. And I usually do a little self-evaluation technique, which is, it's kind of tricky, but you kind of you ask the student teacher how they think it went, and that kind of opens up the dialogue. So I kind of like to do that. It works well. I'll say, how do you think it went? What are some strengths that you did? And I'll kind of have them self-evaluate. And then I'll say, okay, here's some things you may want to try. You passed, obviously. You did a very good job. Now let's look at the other side, and that's when it's not a good lesson. Usually when it's not a good lesson, you can hear it immediately, like you'll hear students back talking. So what I do in that case is I kind of want to just start documenting some things. And I'll say, at like 8:30, a student threw something. A student was asleep in the back of the classroom. So that's going to be in the domain 4 when you look into the classroom management areas. So I'm going to make sure I note that. Now, after the lesson's over with, I'm going to take the student teacher, we're going back to a room, and I'm going to say, okay, how do you think it went? And if it's not a passing indicator, I don't really want to slam them with, you missed this, you missed this, you missed this. But I also don't want the TIAI to be a shock when they receive it. So I'll just tell them, hey, this happened. Did you see this? Did you see the student sleeping? How do you think you should handle that differently? And I kind of prepare them for scores that are not the best. And then what I'll do then is I go home, I type up my TIAI, and then I'll put it in TaskStream, or I'll send it, and then I'll send it to them, and I'll say, just review this. If you agree or disagree, let me know, and then I'll go ahead and submit it. And that's how that works. I don't fail student teachers. I don't try to unless it's really bad, but it shouldn't be bad by the time it gets to student teaching, because student teaching is a very stressful environment. My goal is to educate you and make you a better teacher. So I think looking back at it, I may not be the hardest I should be on some of the student teachers, because I'll tell a student, I'll give you an example without naming names. I had a student teacher who always called the students baby. Like, come on, baby, it's okay, baby. Now this is a female teacher to all kinds of students. So it was just kind of a Southern thing. So I evaluated her, and we get to use as appropriate language. And I just said, look, I'm going to have to give you a merging on this. You really don't want to call them baby and all that. You just want to, and they were like, okay, that's just the way I was raised. And then I hear like a year later that after they graduated, that they got in trouble for cussing in class. So I kind of saw that their communication skills needed a little bit better. So maybe I should have been harder on that one. And I kind of take that personal, that's just not, I should have been harder on correcting their speech, but I don't want to flunk them, so it becomes a big issue. And we see a lot of that. So that's the TIAI, and that is on the OCFBI website. It's a very good instrument, but I just want to introduce this to everybody. This is the instrument that you will be evaluated on when you go into a school. And you can kind of see that it's kind of a scary instrument because it has so many indicators, but don't really get wrapped into that. If you plan it and you do really good lesson plans, you'll hit domain 1. To get domain 2, you'll see domain 2 is assessment. Do you have a strong assessment system, and are you going to give good feedback to the students? So that's kind of easy as well. Domain 3 gets into the instruction, and that's going to be the part that student teaching really is going to get you become a better teacher. So when you do student teaching, it's really going to help you with instruction because you get to practice that. Domain 4 is also, let's see if I can find domain 4. It's the learning environment. How are you controlling the environment? So really domain 3 and domain 4 is what's going on in the classroom. And domain 5 is about your community involvement. Are you trying to get the parents involved? Those are real easy. So that's the TIA instrument. So we'll bounce back now. You'll also see there's teacher intern resources. They have the calendar and the internship handbook. You can look at this at your own discretion. We also have the teacher intern timeline. Let's just look at the teacher intern timeline, and this is very, wow, look at this. It's very time intensive. Many student teachers have a 2 placement. You have the last day of placement, the first day of placement, mandatory school placement, and then you don't get intimidated by that. But student teaching it's a lot of your semester. Now, with that said, I'm going to give you a little bit of advice for everyone who is going to student teach. Now, you can take this advice and throw it in the garbage, but that's completely up to you. I would really recommend not planning any major life choices, life decisions, or things during your student teaching that would cause you stress. Examples of this would be planning to build a house. You don't really want to make a major decision process during student teaching. You don't want, now I had someone who planned a wedding for May and they were student teaching and built a house, and they told me that was very stressful. You really want to take the stress out of student teaching. Now, I'm not saying put your life on hold. I'm just saying prioritize your stress, because student teaching will be very stressful. This is the OCFBI website. It has so much nice stuff, stuff that really will educate you. I want to show you one thing right here. The teacher intern video photo consent form you have to do. I mean, look at all of these forms that they have. Teacher intern, TIAI training, the web resources for teacher interns. And this right here is a Prezi it's a Prezi that was designed about the TIA training. And I'm not going to put a link up on the YouTube video, but just to go back and show you where that was, it is under the teacher intern resources, and it is, it's right, let me see if I make sure I can find it. It's under TIA training. And you'll see it says weekly plans, parent consent form. It's under the TIA training. And this is a Prezi where students, so I'll make sure I highlight this section right here. It is a Prezi where Starkville has put a very good, it's got videos and audio, and you may want to just look at this on your own. I'm not going to bring it into this video, but if you ever, it's up to you if you want to do that, but go ahead and look at the TIA training, and it's going to show you what is expected. Now, why am I showing you all this? When you go into your education career and you go to the next class and next class, think about how you're going to bring the TIAI into your lesson plans, whenever you're taking a class on special education, when you're taking a class on reading. Think about how you're going to put that on your TIAI and how you're going to do that on lesson plans for student teaching. So this is just a Prezi. It's a very good little video. You may want to watch that on your own, but the next thing we're going to look at is we'll go to the next section on the lecture. So hopefully now you see where the most important website for anything going into the schools is the OCFBI website.